down to him next. So he's literally the next level right
All right,
after y'all. So I'll pull him in at times to talk about things too. All right.
All righty, everybody. Welcome to tonight's virtual rally. We've been doing these ever since the pandemic started. You may have attended other ones. If you haven't, welcome. It's primarily hosted by Black Coffee Justice. So big shout out to Black Coffee Justice. Please go check them out on Facebook if you're not following. If you have a question for any of the candidates for them tonight, please drop it in the chat or the comments wherever you're watching this on Daily Motion, YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook, and we will ask that question up here. My name is Matthew Park. I'm a candidate for the Tennessee State House here out of Knoxville, and I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Constance Every from Black Coffee Justice to open us up and tell us what we're going to be talking about tonight.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I appreciate you. So yes, as we did a week ago, we're back into second week of continuing to talk about rallying around justice. What does that look like? As we have been fully aware, COVID-19 showed how we are injustice in our social services and our accessibility and resources. Police brutality shows how we are injustice in our treatment of our Black people and our POC and other poverty and other colored demographics. We are aware of social justice when we watch a president out loud express certain organizations and demographics that are deemed terrorists to most of these groups as good people. Yet when the people are rioting and looking for justice of the actions that have been taking place, he calls those the bad people. We are dealing with injustice in our constant daily lifestyles of being existence of our livelihood. People have lost their jobs. Unemployment is high. They can't afford their rent. They can't afford their light bills. They can't afford any of their bills. And so we are seeing constant platforms of injustice. And we're at a pivotal turn right now. Now is the time where we're going to make a decision as political leaders, as community leaders, as people that are working everyday class, taxpaying Americans. We're going to make a decision right now. Where are we going from here? Are we going to try to continue to instill these old cycles that have deemed themselves unsuccessful and useless? Or are we going to try to really face head on and acknowledge that we have true broken systems in our network and it's time to really focus in and repair those spaces? And not repair them as in patchwork, but repair them as in like we might have to get rid of them and start from scratch all the way to ground zero and rebuild that policy or what that looks like back forward. And so today, this is a very exciting opportunity for me because this is our congressional and our Senate panel. This is the people that are going to Washington, D.C. And if Trump idiotic self somehow makes it through another 2020 election, they'll be facing off and battling on front grounds right there in D.C. with him, toe for toe. It's like Ali versus Frazier, round 4. You know what I'm saying? And so this is an exciting time because, again, we normally have had our local candidates across the state. We normally had our state candidates across the state, but we have had a really difficult time, not necessarily, maybe we didn't focus in like we should have, but we never had a full congressional Senate panel in this state. And so I'm really excited. We have Miss Renee Hoyle, who is representing Knoxville, Tennessee in the congressional battle against Tim Burkett. You already know Tim got to get out of there. We have Miss Keita Hayes, who is out of Nashville, Tennessee, running for congressional seat, who has an excellent insight of the very factors of criminal injustice and how that really unfolds when you can be a very flat out innocent individual and literally go through that process and still have to serve time. Fully aware of that. And we have Miss Robin Hayes, who's running for our Senate seat out of Nashville, Tennessee. And her background and story is that she knows what it's like to be a single mom trying to make ends meet and provide for 2 children and what that struggle really looks like, getting through the process of not just educating your children, but self-education so you can provide that better life. So one of the things I can say about all 3 of these women today is that they come from people-oriented lifestyles, people understanding, knowing what that looks like from their own areas and their own lifestyles and livelihoods. And they are fully aware of that now when they go forward, they're not just making changes about what they have experienced, but the experiences of those that share that common ground with them. And so without further ado, I want to now give an opportunity for our candidates to go around and introduce themselves, tell a little bit about themselves a bit more. And then we'll move into some of our first topics of issue, which I think the first one we're going to start with, which is the police immunity and what that is happening right now in our congressional state. So I guess we'll start with Ms. Robin, then we'll go Ms. Keita, and then we'll go Ms. Renee.
I'm happy to talk about police immunity. I want to say that it started off as a creature of statute, and it was initially called the KKK Act. It was really an act just to create an avenue for people to sue public officials. So essentially it evolved because it was a protection for police officers to carry out their duties. So this policing really stemmed from capturing a runaway slave. So policing is rooted in slavery. And so we see the fruits of it now with the qualified immunity doctrine. The qualified immunity doctrine comes out of this, it's a creature of case law, not of statute. So the Supreme Court over the years has made certain rulings and created this cloak of protection for police officers. So police officers could defend their behavior if they were acting in good faith, or there wasn't some other law that clearly said that this conduct was wrong. And it's for the qualified immunity to be lifted, the behavior had to be extremely over the top. And there were some really extremely over the top cases where qualified immunity walked. So now we have this new proposed bill in Congress, that Justice for Policing. It seeks to do a whole lot of things, but I'm going to talk about the qualified immunity piece. It essentially gets rid of qualified immunity. It uses the Supreme Court language of good faith and the law precedent, and says that these things cannot be used for a police officer to defend their behavior. So over the years, since the 1800s, qualified immunity has protected police officers from civil liability and has resulted in the deaths of Black and brown people and the rape of Black women. We cannot forget the officer who was convicted of raping 13 Black women. And because it is so hard to pierce this qualified immunity doctrine, many of these officers have gotten off. And so if I were your United States Senator today, I would fight to make sure that the qualified immunity doctrine is gotten rid of, so that we can hold police officers accountable. I want to add this too, that Mitch McConnell has said that he doesn't want businesses to be liable for workers who contract COVID-19. This is exactly what the qualified immunity doctrine is. Used to protect people from civil lawsuits, from workers and civilians, get the parallel here, from seeking damages for how they've been mistreated. We have got to change the leadership in Congress. We have got to have people that are going to fight for civilians, to fight for the George Floyds, and to fight for workers who are risking their lives to make sure that we have food on our tables. And this is why I'm running for United States Senate, because we need to change the culture of our nation. When we address systemic racism, we address worker oppression, we address issues related to the uninsured, we address equal pay for equal work for women, we address the environment, we address every injustice in our society if we are willing to say no to systemic racism.
Thank you, Ms. Robin. Ms. Keita, you're up next.
Hey, good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank Constance and Matthew for inviting me to be here tonight and to be able to speak to the audience about who I am and why it is that I am running for Congress and why it is time for change. And I fully, wholeheartedly believe that I am that change that we need. So just want to give everyone a little bit of introduction about myself. I am running for Congress in District 5, which consists of Davidson County, Dixon County, and part of Northern Cheatham County. And so prior to deciding to do this, I served as a public defender. I served my community as a public defender for 6.5 years. Prior to becoming a public defender, I served time in federal prison, almost 4 years, 3 years and 10 months for a crime that I didn't commit. So as Constance mentioned in the introduction, that I am definitely someone who understands the criminal justice system and where we are right now, being number one, a Black woman, number two, being someone who was has experienced this racist criminal justice system on a personal level, and who also fought for the rights of those within this racist criminal justice system every single day for 6.5 years. And I was very passionate about doing that, and will take that same passion to Washington to stand up and to fight for the citizens in my district as well too. And it's important that we recognize that during this time, it is really, really important that we have people in Washington that are going to stand up for us, that are not going to be afraid to advocate for the tough issues, and that are going, and people that are not going to just stand on the sidelines and just wait for legislation to happen and for them to sign on to it, or to be late to the party, being one of the last ones to sign up on it. We need people in Washington that understand the issues, and people that are going to fight for those issues. And it's really important too that not only do we need a progressive in Washington, but we need someone that can look at these policies, procedures, and laws through the lens of someone being African-American, through the lens of someone being a female, through the lens of someone that has been saddled with student loan debt, through the lens of someone who has experienced this racial criminal justice system, and through the lens of someone who was a public defender and understands exactly what it means to advocate for people. So we were talking about qualified immunity, and we were actually discussing it on the call before we went live. And the interesting thing with me is that as a public defender, we saw police misconduct pretty much every single day, all day. As a public defender, I have filed complaints against police officers to hold them accountable. And the terminology that they use here in Nashville is unfounded. I had a police officer to tase a client and to kick him in the face, all for arresting him on a misdemeanor probation violation because he failed a drug test. I've had police officers to strip search my client on the side of the road and then come to court and lie about it. I've had police officers lie about the very reasons why they were stopping my clients, and then when we proved otherwise, they lied about it. I even had them tell me that, well, you've given us all of this. We see, how this is, but we're going to put down that this complaint was unfounded and just recommend that this officer take some classes. And so this is what happens. And so it's not only just qualified immunity, it is so much broader than that. It goes so much further than that. So with qualified immunity, a lot of the things that Robin said are true just from the origins of police and where all of this stems from. And qualified immunity, it protects police officers, it protects DAs, and it protects people in positions of power. And so people that are in positions of power, they can go and they can do whatever they want, knowing that they're operating under this qualified immunity and that they're never going to be able to be held accountable for that. And so, what we have done with qualified immunity is almost identical to what we have done with the exclusionary rule. And the exclusionary rule is what we have at our disposal in the courtroom to hold police officers available, because if it is found that they have violated somebody's rights, then if, let's say that that it's drugs or that it's a confession, if it is found that it is fruits of the poisonous tree, meaning that it stems from them violating someone's rights, then the police officers will not be able to use that evidence. The DAs won't be able to use the evidence against the person in court. And so they have whittled away at the exclusionary rule, and we are down to, well, if the police officer was acting in good faith. And that's where we are with qualified immunity. Well, any police officer can come in and say, oh, well, I was acting in good faith. I was acting within the confines of my job, and they can come in there and they can say that, and then they will have this shield and this cloak of qualified immunity because we have this thing here that says acting in good faith. And what exactly does that mean? So that's the thing, is that when we are looking at this legal language, we need to start breaking each piece of it down. And really, because we think, oh, well, yeah, it says qualified immunity. It says you can't use chokeholds, and it's those types of things. But when you really start to really dig into this thing, then you are really starting to see that it's just a bunch of words. And so what are they really saying? And so to me, while I appreciate Congress wanting to, come and to resolve this issue and to help with where we are and to move us forward. I do appreciate that, but I feel like that just a little bit more thought should have went into this. And maybe what we should have done is that we really should have listened to the community before we done this, because Congress had already done this legislation before George Floyd's brother spoke to the committee yesterday. So, we are talking about that we're doing things for the people and that we're representing the people, but really and truly what we're doing is we're saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. And this is what is best for you, without even talking to people in the community to see if this is something that is really going to work. And again, and this is why I say that we have to have different people in Congress that are viewing these different things from the lens of various different characteristics of that person. Because if not, what happens is that we just end up with more of the same, which is what we don't want and which is what we don't need. Right now, the people all across the nation are calling for change. And what we are calling for, because I am part of that group that is calling for change, because I stand with the citizens in my community, because we have blood on our streets here in Nashville, and these police officers are still walking around and nothing has been happening to them. And so even though I would be in Congress and there are things that I would be able to legislate on the federal level, I am still a citizen here in my district. And I will stand with the citizens in my district and calling for more cooperation between the police department and the Community Oversight Board. Had I been in Congress, I would have stood with my constituents here in District 5, first of all, calling for the Community Oversight Board when there was so much controversy around it, while I would have been in Washington and can't legislate that particular thing. I'm a citizen, and I would have been standing with the citizens here. I would have been standing with the citizens calling for the arrest of those 2 officers that gunned down those 2 Black kids here in Nashville. I would have been standing with my people, because that's what it's about. Because I can't go to Washington and legislate if I am not part of the community that I am going to be representing. Because one of the things that I talk about is that it is about restoring the power back to the people, because that is who has the power. We don't have the power being in Washington. It is the people that have the power, and it needs to be restored back to them. It doesn't need to be up there with rich white billionaires. It needs to be with the 3 of us here on this call that are from the community, and we are going to represent the community. And that's what needs to happen.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keita. Excellent explanation. All right, Ms. Hoyle, you are up next.
So much. My name is Renee Lewis. I'm running for Congress in Tennessee's 2nd congressional district. I want to thank Black Coffee Justice for endorsing our campaign. It means a lot to me to have your endorsement. And Tennessee nationally is not really considered in play. And so to have these endorsements, it's really important that people see that the community is supporting candidates like that. So thank you. I got my start here in Tennessee working for the Tennessee Clean Water Network. I was its executive director for 14 years. And in those 14 years, we used the power of the Clean Water Act to protect Tennessee's beautiful rivers and streams. And I learned a lot in those years about the legal process and how the law works and how it really is designed for some people and definitely excluding others. And so I come from a background of having to watch legislation, both federal and the state level. And I can tell you, this country was founded on principles of equality written by rich white people, rich white men for the equality of rich white men. And so that was over 200 years ago. And expanding that equality to everyone else has been a real struggle in this country for the 200 and some years that it has been here. My father was involved in the Chicano movement out in the West, and experienced growing up with a lot of racism. He's Mexican and he was born here, but experienced a lot of racism and police brutality back when police were not nearly as militarized as they are now. They didn't have the tools that we have now, but boy, they were pretty creative in how they used them. And chokeholds and carotid holds, those things have been part of the toolkit of policing for decades. And So having grown up watching my father work to, sustain the rights of the United Farm Workers and for the Chicano movement, and really taught me a lot about what people suffer in this country, and for no other reason than just a skin tone, and for no other reason. So in my work in the environment, what I've discovered is that language and legislation can turn on a word, and that's especially in environmental policy and law. It can change with a decimal point. It can change with a turn of phrase. And so when we look at qualified immunity in the bill that was just dropped in the House, what you see is a lot of turn of phrase that gives you a lot of wiggle room to squeeze out of. And that's what we want to avoid. We want to learn from past legislation that hasn't worked and tighten up those loopholes. So for example, this legislation says distinctly, it shall not be a defense or immunity to any action brought under this section against a local law enforcement officer if the defendant was acting in good faith and that the defendant believed reasonably or otherwise that his or her conduct was lawful at the time when the conduct was committed. It is important that we have people at the legislature that understand how legal language works, because in that is an enormous, you can drive a Mack truck through that loophole. All someone has to say is, in that moment, I felt my life was endangered. And I shot that guy in the back while he was running away from me. I mean, that's basically what it comes down to. And so it's been interesting using some of that training to look at some of these issues around police brutality, because it's the same thing. It's like shape-shifting. It's like, well, we're going to use this word and that word, and then suddenly nothing changes. We haven't really moved the ball forward. We've got lots of language. We have a definition, but we haven't changed the situation on the ground, and we need to. Because as long as qualified immunity exists, police don't ever have to think twice about their actions. And that's what we want. We want greater training for cops so they can be in the moment to make better decisions. We want them to be able to protect us, sure, but we also don't need them to be just acting with impunity because they have this qualified immunity. And so as a congresswoman, I would definitely be watching the types of language that come across my desk to make sure that language is as tightly bound as it can be, so there isn't a lot of wiggle room to move around it. In environmental legislation, you'll see lots of wiggle room to give polluters all these rights. There's a bill that passed a few years ago called the Developers, the Permittees Bill of Rights. And it was about giving industry a Bill of Rights. And those Bill of Rights included polluting. So you've got to really, really watch the language that comes across. I think it is important that we remove and or tighten down qualified immunity so that it is very limited and it is very clear and you know when it can be used. That is my position on qualified immunity.
Thank you, Ms. Hoyes. I appreciate that. And of course, Matt, you're going to participate in this because you're a candidate running for office too. So Matt gets the luxury of hopping in all these conversations because he is my co-host. And so as you can see, you are seeing that your federal legislation is going to support some of your very agendas. And so I think that this would be a great time to share with Black Coffee's candidates. That's what y'all are. So y'all get in office. As far as I'm concerned, y'all Black Coffee politicians now. So with your fellow politicians, the question is, I guess the thing is, maybe share your 20-point view that you came up with that could be implemented today as they're fighting for those legislation changes with the immunity. Of the fact is you have a 20-point scale that we can put in play right now that wouldn't even require their intervention at all. We could do this on our state level as we speak. So yeah, you can talk about the same thing, the immunity issue and how you're looking at in your state legislature, what you could do with that policy as well.
Yeah, I think the big thing is to realize is that it's a two-way street between legislation that happens on the state level and legislation that happens on the federal level. So often, Congress people and senators will use examples of how states have tried something in order to convince their fellow representatives and senators to do it on the federal level, right? So for instance, when I was involved with a conversation with the State Department, some employees there about non-gender binary representations on our federal passports. And the exact quote I got back was, "We will never do that until a state does it first." And that is so many things. So that's why it's important for us here on the state level to do things like talk about how to hold sheriffs accountable. We've done a lot of research over the last few weeks. We don't have a good accountability system in Tennessee. Talk about holding DAs accountable. DAs are only accountable really to the Tennessee Bar Association, but the Bar Association very rarely, if ever, has used that power. So we need to have better accountability, because we can pass these laws about when officers are allowed to do things, but until we hold the DAs accountable, then we are not going to be able to realize the value of those laws. So I think it's so important for people to, and very factually, Republicans have realized the value of state law because they've spent a lot of money taking back state legislators and legislatures over the past decade in order to help tinker and use those laboratories of democracy, so that then they can then take those laws and push them forward on the state level, because they will have been rolled out across the country already. So I think it's so important that we continue to fight at the local and state level for things that we want to see in Congress. We give our wonderful, what will be wonderful representatives when these ladies get elected, we give them the value proposition, the data that they need to make this argument on the floor of the House and the floor of the Senate. And so that argument and that data, and it all starts at the local and state level.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. So how it goes, I'll spend roughly about 15 to 20 minutes focusing on the topic issues. And then the last 10 or 15 minutes, we go into the threads and we actually start taking some of the viewers' questions and comments as well. So the second big thing that's coming down right now is, of course, defund the police. We are hearing that all over the place right now. And we're hearing the 8 can't wait policies are dropping too. Here in Knoxville, we have a police advisory committee that was put together by Elizabeth Rowland, who's also running for state representative of our area. But we were working on this project a while ago. Like, it's even been before I even came on board a year ago. It had already been in process maybe 2 years before that. So altogether, it's been about 3 years of various community members of different demographics, nationality, ethnicity coming together and looking at our own police forces on ground zero. As we've been seeing across the country, many areas have bloated police budgets and very little money going into social and civil services. Unfortunately, here in Knoxville, we cleared almost a $60 million budget for our police forces and $3 million in our social services and resource department. And so, I know that for Mrs. Hayes, Robin Hayes, we have 2 Hayes. Okay, so for Ms. Robin Hayes, I know for her, she is outraged that Trump spent $700 billion plus in our military, but same thing, even on our national level, he didn't put any money in our social service and resource area. So we're seeing a problem here, right? And it's even started to become a trend. And so we are seeing in some areas where we have seen several cities and states talk about this, and some have actually went forward and done some type of defunding. But I know that when we say the word defund, for the people that are closed-minded or even Blue Lives Matter individuals, for example, they're outraged when they hear that. They're thinking, oh, you're getting rid of the police, you're going to let the world go crazy. But that's really not what we're saying, because so many models across the country and across the globe have shown when you invest more in the resource social service side versus the police side, their crime rates are lower, their life and their livelihood is better, their education and healthcare systems are the greatest, and even their government on all levels, if they have it divided how we do, which I know in parliament and diplomatic spaces is a little bit different but kind of similar, but still the same concept. They agree and get along and have better legislation pushed through for policy and effect versus a bunch of bickering and fighting, but we have gerrymandering going on most of our floors because we can't figure out how we're going to get along with these things. And so let's talk about defunding the police. What does that mean to you? How does that look in the model of as we move forward with, just like we just talked about immunity, and now we're saying, okay, well, we're going to make some changes in even the funding policies, or better yet, let's say that we don't decide we want to take so much funding out, but we are going to say you can't get funding for X, Y reasons if you're not meeting these certain standards or giving these reports. And so this time we're going to start with Ms. Keita Hayes, Renee Hoyle, and then Miss Robin, and then Matthew, you come in at the end. I'm sorry, Matthew, I will get you first. So Miss Hoyle, you are up first on the mic.
So do you want me to go first?
You're right. I said Miss Keita, Miss Renee, Miss Robin, and Matt. So yes, y'all know the order better than me. Y'all know what to do. Just unmute your mic.
So, defund the police, it is not what people think. It is not saying get rid of the police. Essentially what they are saying is exactly what Constance said, is that we have police officers that are getting all of this money in the budget and every single other department is not. And so when people are saying defund the police, what they're talking about is divesting money from the police departments and investing money into other programs within the community that is going to keep us safe. And so, that's what it is. And I know there's been a lot of conversation around what defund the police means and this, that, and the other. And people are saying, oh, well, go Google it, go look it up, this, that, and the other. But I personally, think that, we can have these conversations, and we need to be having these conversations because we have been defunding education for years. We have been defunding housing for years. We have been defunding the economy for years. We have been defunding healthcare for years. Right now in the federal government, they spend almost $2 trillion, on the military with the military budget. But then they tell us that they cannot afford Medicare for all. So what we can do is that we can take money from the military and we can put it in these social services that's going to help us have a better quality of life. And that is what we need to be doing. And that is what defunding the police is all about. Particularly, we all across the country, we saw when COVID hit that there were so many school systems that did not have the necessary things that they need in order to continue to function. But not once did we ever hear that the police department did not have what they needed in order to continue to function. Not once did we hear that. And so there, right then and there, is something that we can pay attention to and we can listen to. We have heard so many people talk about the fact that they don't have health care and they couldn't go to the doctor, all of these things. We know that COVID has disproportionately affected Black and Brown and low income communities. We know that. But again, not once did we ever hear that the police department did not have what they needed to have in order to make it through this pandemic. So do we need to defund the police and take money from them and invest that money into other areas and other departments in order to keep our community safe? Absolutely, we do. Because we cannot talk about dismantling the school to prison pipeline if we are not investing and funding our kids and the school systems that they're in. We cannot, talk about, mass incarceration and criminal justice reform without investing in reentry for people that are being released from jails and prisons. And we can't talk about them being able to have a successful transition back into the community because first we have to talk about whether they're going to able to be successful. And so we've got to invest money in that. We have people that are, right now because they can't pay their rent, can't pay their mortgages. And in some states that, they were not doing any evictions, but guess what? They've kicked back in now. And so now we're going to be seeing this. We're going to see people that are having to come to court, people that are going to be possibly evicted, people that are going to want to know, where am I going to stay? How am I going to pay my rent? And then not only are they going to have to come up with the money to pay for their mortgage if they want to keep it or to pay money for their landlord, they've got attorney fees that they're going to have to pay as well. There's going to be court costs and all of those things that are just also going to be added into those things. So there are so many things. And then we have so many great organizations in our communities that are doing the very things that our community needs for them to do, but they don't have the necessary funding in order for them to be able to do it on the larger scale. And so again, we need to take the money from the police and we need to invest it into our community and into the people in the community, because we cannot talk about Black Lives Matter. We can't talk about criminal justice reform. We cannot do these things when we are steadily giving the police departments the money and not investing here, because you can't tell me that Black Lives Matter, but you don't invest in me. Like, I don't need you to send me a tweet telling me that Black Lives Matter. I don't need you to post it on, Facebook or Instagram or anywhere telling me Black Lives Matter. I need for you to show me that Black Lives Matters. And again, this goes back to listening to the community and what the people want. And it also goes back to having the hard conversations. And Martin Luther King said, at some point in time, you've got to for everybody to stand for something. And we as people in our communities, we need to be paying attention to who is standing for something and who is not. Because this lip service to, oh, well, we're going to examine policies and procedures, about police officers and all this kind of stuff. That's fine. That's great. You can do that. But in the process, you still need to evaluate the budget that is going to the police department versus what is going to everyone else. So don't tell me that Black Lives Matter, but what you are doing is something completely different than that. And so we need leaders in Washington that is going to stand up, leaders that are going to demand that Black Lives Matter, not just Congress sashaying out with kente cloths on and taking the knee. Like, all of this right here has become showmanship. And so here's the thing. You want to show me something, and you want to show me that you stand with me and you value me and you value my life, well, then you do something for real. Don't be parading out here and all of this other kind of stuff. Like, nobody cares about that. This is not what we asked y'all. This is not what we asked y'all to do. And so again, this is more of, well, we are up here, we know what we're doing, we're going to do this, and we're going to give this to you. And oh, you Black people and you allies, be satisfied. And if you're not, you're ungrateful. Well, wait a minute, because you didn't come to me and you didn't ask me. Like, I told you what was going to be required of you for me to feel like that Black lives really matters and that it's important to you, but you didn't do that. So you don't get to come to me and tell me that I am ungrateful for something that I never asked you to do to begin with. And that is the thing, is that we have got to have leaders that are not afraid, that are bold, and that is going to stand up, that is going to challenge all of this showmanship and be like, hey, let's get down to business and let's do what the people are really requiring us to do. And again, for me, it just goes back to restoring the power back to the people. I cannot say that enough. I absolutely cannot say that enough. And like I said, it is time out for business as usual. Change is happening in the streets, on the local levels. We are seeing, cities that are actually taking money from the police department and reinvesting it in other areas. So change is happening. People are listening. And now it is time for change on the federal level right now. And I would definitely be one of those people that would not be afraid to argue the tough issues, that would not advocate, for people that look like me and the rest of us on this call here. And I am going to be the person, at the end of the day, when my grandkids and my nieces and nephews, when they look and they say, oh, well, what did Keita Haynes do in this moment? Keita Haynes stood on the right side of the law this time.
Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Ms. Hoyle, you're up next.
Well, I think no matter what it was called, they were just going to weaponize the name of it, just like they weaponized Medicare for All. I mean, so the name, you can just push that aside because, whatever you call it, it's just going to get demonized. But, for those that are willing to engage in a conversation, I mean, I think what we're talking about here is looking at how we spend our money, and budgets, whether they're federal or local or interdepartmental, really can determine what the priorities of that organization are. And so when the budget for the police is heavy on militarization, heavy on weaponry, well, then you know what the priorities of the police are. And as I reviewed the 8 Can't Wait, what I saw there was there's got to be a lot of re-education. And re-education is going to take money. And re-education is not something you can do once to somebody. It's going to have to be ongoing. It's a commitment about turning around an organization that has been given a lot too much leash. And now it's basically wrapped itself up in it. It's killing people and using all of these things to justify it. And so what we have to do, so defunding the police is really about how we're going to reorganize these resources, because we're not going to get rid of the police. But do we need to have the police so militarized? Do we have to have police that are triggered so that when they see a Black person, they immediately go on high alert? What is that about? And that is not something that you take a 4-hour class to get rid of. And so these are investments we need to make into these organizations and agencies that actually let the police know we're serious about this. And it also lets the community know we're serious about this. We're going to have this ongoing all the time. And so when I think of defund the police, that's what I think. It's sort of like rearrange the funding of the police. But I'm sure that'll get co-opted too into something bad. But that is the position that I would definitely take, that we have got to rearrange and reprioritize what we expect from the police and how we expect to pay for it.
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. Excellent. Mm-hmm. All right, Ms. Robin Hayes, you're up.
First, I want to talk about how the police are funded. So there are 2 pots of money that come down from the federal government that fund the police. It's cops money and it's burn money. That money comes down and funds the police department. We haven't heard cuts about that money. Okay, so they get a block grant. And if they don't comply with certain things right now, they could lose burn money and cops money. And that's true for Tennessee. So every state has to have certain laws on the books, or otherwise they could lose funding. For example, police officers are not allowed to give a rape victim a lie detector test. If a rape victim is given a lie detector test and the feds find out about it, the state is out of compliance and can lose burn or cops money. So there's already a mechanism in the federal government now where police can be defunded. So this issue of defunding the police department is not new. It is already on the books concerning sexual assault victims. We need to do the same advocacy around this issue, around policing of Black people. We need to say, if you don't comply with certain restrictions on kneeling on somebody's neck for 8 minutes and killing this person, you lose federal dollars. We need to hold policing officers, agencies, and states accountable for policing, and that's by withholding funds from them if they violate laws, period. And the people who are protesting about defunding the police department shouldn't be protesting because it's already a mechanism. They're protesting because it deals with Black folk. This is why people don't want to take that statue down in the Capitol building. Because every time we begin to address Black folk and Black people assert their humanity by saying Black Lives Matter, or that we want to pass anti-lynching laws, we want to hold you accountable, people get upset. This is about power and control. So once I assert power, now you do something to try to keep me powerless. We already have laws on the books that make funding contingent on being compliant, especially when it comes to sexual assault victims. This is also true. The reason why we have a law in the book that says that people who contract HIV and they don't tell a third party and they can be held criminally liable, those laws spring out of federal regulations or telling states you got to do this or you'll lose money. So I believe what we need to do is we need to look at how police departments are spending burn and cops money. We need to restructure the funding to make sure that police officers are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you're exactly right, Constance. The evidence shows that the better we take care of our communities and social service ways, we can reduce the need for policing. We had a Driving While Black report done here in Nashville. Gideon's Army did this report. And guess what? Nothing came of it. We've got to hold our leaders accountable. Right now, politicians feel okay talking about Black Lives Matter and Black people's rights. But this has been going on for years. Where were you when Jacqueline Clemens was killed and Daniel Hambert was gunned down in North Nashville? But when you saw this man being killed and yelling out for his mama, it wrenched you. There was no way around the guilt. We need to stand up for racial justice in season and out of season. We need to stand up for right when it's not popular, when people are not going to be okay with it. We need to stop being afraid to use our privilege to help people. I grew up in a trailer park where my mother and I were the only African-American family. I grew up in a dumpy trailer park. But I lived there from I was 5 to 16 years old. I was from kindergarten to 11th grade. And my mother and I would not have survived that trailer park if it were not for some white people who used their privilege to help us through that situation. Because in spite of the racism we experienced in that trailer park, I made some really good friends. I built community. And if it had not been for that trailer park, I wouldn't be asking you for your vote today to be your United States Senator. We need to vote for leaders who are for real, who come from hard places. People are hurting out here. It's time for us to get real. This is not a popularity contest. This race is about truth. COVID-19 taught us that who is in leadership is a matter of life and death. If you want to save somebody's life, vote for somebody that's going to fight for you and represent you and can feel you. We've got to bring this country together. 2020 has taught us that we need it more than ever. The Pledge of Allegiance has new meaning to me in 2020. We need justice and liberty and unity for all.
Thank you, Ms. Robin. Boy, if y'all ever thought that there was a consistory in a political forum, I think Katie and Robin Hayes got it on lock. They ain't ready for me up there, but I think I got it covered. They already got me covered. All right, Mr. Matthew Park, from the state legislator perspective, what do you think about these, that once again, your federal support and what they're saying?
I don't want to go after Ms. Robin anymore. That I totally agree with you. You touch my heart. You touch my heart. Yeah. When we look at the police, Constance and I met with the chief of police here in Knoxville last week. We had a great meeting. We talked about how we feel sorry for them, how we feel sorry for the police, because they have been used as a Swiss Army knife of government. They have been used as a catch-all when governments were unwilling, when city councils and county commissions and state legislatures and federal governments were unwilling to provide funds for mental health, for substance use, for all sorts of things happening in our communities. Those governments said, let the police take care of it. And that's not fair to police officers. So that's why if we want a word that says what we're trying to do, I think it is de-scope. I think it is saying, let's constrict what policing is. Let's take away their responsibilities that have been laid on top of them by governments that were unwilling to budget for moral and empathetic things for our community. Let's say, how about we don't let the police be the primary providers of mental health care in our state, in our country anymore? Let's say that. And then let's take that money that we save from taking that responsibility away, and we can move it into mental health care. Let's say whenever someone is having a substance use episode, that the police shouldn't respond to that. It should be substance use counselors. We've taken that responsibility away. Let's demilitarize the police. Let's whittle down what the responsibility is. Then let's take whatever is left, transform it into what we want it to be as a community. And that is what we're getting at. It is so critical that we recognize that the police have often been a tool of the market and not a tool of the community. They have been used to further people's profits, to protect industry. They have not been used historically to protect people, especially Black people. They have been used as a tool of a government and a system that makes profit and expands based on oppressing people. And when we say defund the police, when we say transform the police, de-scope the police, whatever it may be, modernize the police, what we're saying is we want services to deal with the issues in our community, and we want to constrict the role of the police in the community. And we care about everyone. We care about, I heard Constance Every tell Chief Thomas how much she cared about the mental health of police officers. When we can come together on that simple idea that we want our communities to be better and we want to provide those services to our communities, that's when we move forward. That's when we start to really tear down institutional and systemic racism. When we start to overcome these structures that have been put in place to keep our people, our Black brothers and sisters, our brown brothers and sisters oppressed. That's what these structures were built for. There's a reason that the 13th Amendment outlaws slavery and then uses the word except. That shouldn't be there. The reason that was there was to provide a fallback solution to a problem that was created by racist people. Outlaw slavery except under imprisonment. And then we created mass incarceration. So that's what it means to me.
You did all right, Matthew. You did all right. And so, yeah, I just want to piggyback on a couple things that Matthew said. Yes, it's true. I did tell our police chief that my concern was for our police forces, men and women, because I am a disabled combat veteran. I served 15 years in our military force. One of the things that war brought back home for me was my mental state. It is shattered today. It is shattered. And I'm okay with admitting that because I'm aware of the need of mental health and the stigma that surrounds that. It took me a long time to get into my mental health with the VA because cause of a lot of stigmas and cause of wanting to be like, I'm okay and that didn't affect me. But the reality is that you don't go to war and come home not unaffected. Even if you do come back with all your fingers and toes, you are affected. And so let's be realistic. Like we just said, we're all agreeing. We're asking regular men and women with families and husbands and wives and children and elderly members and sick people in their families too, to come in and, like we just said, be an Army Swiss knife. I agree with Matthew. We're asking police officers to step way outside of their professional scope. We're telling them, you got to be the mental health guy. You're telling them, you got to be the drug rehabilitation person. We're telling them, you got to be the intervention of a domestic issue in a father and parent home with children. And these are some of these issues are in their very own homes that they're struggling to deal with. So I said, let's just be realistic. We're asking you all to do too much. And as a person that comes from a military background, I was like, I know with the military, I would say we got adequate training. But again, our training was every single day. You got up at 4:30 and did PT for a reason. You're getting programmed for something. You went to the range every weekend to practice your shot and target. You're being programmed for something. You had to go do 3 to 4 weeks out in the field with no roof or barrier or shower and had to learn how to survive in the conditions. Again, you're being programmed for something. Police officers are not getting that kind of training because it's a job. See, it's a different type of job. The military is a job, but they're expected. You sign a whole contract with that. With a police job, it is still a choice of employment. I mean, I can come in, work this job, and decide I quit. In the Army, it's not like that. You sign a contract, a year of agreement. If you back out on that contract, you're facing court martial and all kinds of things on your head at this point. And so we're still asking people that do 9 to 5s try to basically function in the capacity of military train. And it's not. That's not been realistic. Again, what we saw in these spaces where we saw the protests kind of increase to a state of unrest, who do they call in? They called in the military. When it got to the point where the police officers couldn't handle no more, the military came in. And you know why? Because it's the last line of defense and the most trained defense. So again, we are asking people to step outside their scope, which leads into my final question before we open the floor to our viewers on our Facebook and other live platforms, which is we're going right into it. I know for a fact in Knoxville, Tennessee, we spend $3 million a year in unmarked cars. To me, I feel like we're riding a fine line of entrapment with that behavior, because it's like, entrapment says you got to tell me you're a cop if I'm about to sell you some drugs, right? Like that's the given, right? But when you ride around in unmarked cop cars, or like in some of our cop cars, we even have an Infinity. Like, why do we have an unmarked Infinity in our police force? What is the necessity of that expense? And so we're seeing areas where, like Matthew said, maybe de-scope is a friendlier word than defund, but this is a prime example we're talking about. We have no business spending $3 million in unmarked cars. That $3 million can go into the mental health programs that we're very much so talking about to support not only the police forces, but the public. So again, when we start talking about these areas where we're trying to push funding to, like I know right now with our location, a lot of our leadership here, as far as our Black leadership, is in agreement of 3 things. Number 1, body cameras must go on our officers' chests. Number 2, we are demanding mental health professionals be added to our workforces. And number 3, we want our community oversight board called PARC be re-empowered with a leader that we as a public all agree upon. Additionally, to that, give him the necessary resource funding and tools that he needs. I know one of the lead candidates told our mayor here that he can't do his job successfully under PARC unless he has investigators added to his payroll, because how is he going to investigate a complaint if he has it against the police? You want me to use police officer investigators to invest themselves? We already just had a problem with that with Knox County and KPD having to resolve their memorandum of understanding, and now it's TBI and FBI who's going to start doing those investigations. So you see, you can't do that. You can't ask for these type of things to happen if you're not going to adequately resource it. So the prime example, what we're talking about, de-scoping. So when we say de-scope, let's talk about where we're talking about where we want this funding to move to. I think we all have agreed that it definitely goes into mental health, drug intervention, other social service resources. But let's talk about de-scoping and help people understand. And when we say de-scope, like the $3 million in unmarked cars, where are we actually pushing that funding to? What is the model looking like in those capacities? How are we taking stress and workload off of our officers so they're not so quick to put a knee on somebody's neck and choke them out because they really mad at their wife for cussing them out about not putting gas in the truck this morning? Let's be realistic about what we're dealing with in those cycles of how we get to some of these spaces. And so that's my final question before we go to the public, which is that what are we talking about de-scoping and moving that funding to? Like I said, I know my vote is definitely under mental health from the get-go. But when you start saying what we're going to do with the money, off the bat, that's the first question that anybody that you talk to is going to come with. Well, Ms. Hayes, where are you trying to move the money to? If you're going to take it from here, where are we going with it? Okay, Renee, you're looking at all the legislation, but again, how are you going to rewrite that to where we're pushing it to? So it's still the same concept. We have to address where our money is getting moved to. I think we lost Ms. Keita. Hopefully she'll pop back in for us. And so Ms. Hoya, we're going to start with you first. What are we talking about when we say de-scoping and putting that funding into other resources?
As Matthew said, I think we have to revision what the work of the police is. They used to be called peace officers back in the day, and maybe we want them more around general, peace behavior than militarized behavior. Doesn't mean you can't have a special team that goes in and deals with, violent crimes, but there's no reason to have all the police being available for every single crime. And so I think it's, we can move money around, away from the militarization to, of course, the social programs. I don't know why we need to have armed resource officers in schools. Apparently there's some federal funding that allows for that, and I don't think we need that. I don't think we need cops in our schools. I think that really just sets up the public school to prison pipeline. There are different ways for municipalities to do it based on their communities, and they need to have a lot of community input before they start figuring out what they're going to do with that money, because policing is for the community, and the community should have a stake in what policing looks like for them and what it means for them. Unfortunately, policing means different things to different people. To some people, I call the police and they come out and they deal with it, and I'm grateful. And for other people, they don't call the police, because they know that if the police come out, they might get shot when they're asking for help. So, the community really needs to have a deeper understanding about what they mean by policing. And it's going to take some time to figure all that out. And we need to have resources in place so that the community can figure that out. And some of that can come, from moving around funding from the police force for other things. So I would definitely support those things federally.
Thank you, Ms. Renee.
Mm-hmm.
Matthew, we're going to swing it to you this time. What are you thinking about on the state side of this?
Yeah, so I'm looking at several things. One, definitely mental health. I mentioned substance use counselors, but I'm also looking at one of the biggest things, like being very, very, tunnel visioned on Knoxville. It costs the city of Knoxville around $13 million a year to run our CAT system, and that's money we pay with. After grants, that's money we pay with revenues coming off the tickets. Right now,
just so our candidates know, CAT is our public bus transportation system.
Yeah.
Just in case y'all do that. Yeah.
So when we look at the money we could move around, I firmly believe that public transit fees and fares are a regressive tax on the poor. So I believe that it does a lot for our environment. It does a lot for our people, especially low income and working class people, Black and brown communities. If we make public transit cost free, you can get on and you can ride. That's one big place for me that I think we need to move things. We need to move things. Here in Tennessee, I want to create a Tennessee Conservation Corps. So that corps will function off the same CCC that built a lot of our infrastructure in the United States after the New Deal. I think that we need that to help put people back to work after COVID-19, but also do something about our crumbling infrastructure and do something about our climate crisis. We're going to need that to go in and build hospitals and new schools and upgrade our school infrastructure. We're going to need that to daylight streams so that we have cleaner water. We're going to need this labor, and we can pay for a lot of that by moving away from the current policing model that we have.
Good job, Matthew. Excellent, excellent. All right, out there, social media world, get ready. Your questions are coming in next. All right, Ms. Robin Hayes, you're up next. Tell us what you're thinking about, how we're going to get that funding around.
Tennessee is ranked number 4 in women who are murdered by their intimate partners. In Nashville, domestic violence is the number 1 call police officers get. I'm sure it's true also for Knox County. Domestic violence is a huge problem affecting our state and the community. 10 million children each year are exposed to domestic violence. So I would propose to move that money to educate and to fund local domestic violence programs. Children go to school hungry. And I would recommend that we circulate that money into nutrition programs. I also would recommend that we fund programs that will do wraparound service for drug and alcohol dependency. I do chaplain work for a dependency in a drug and alcohol program, where I talk to men and women who are struggling to get off drugs and alcohol abuse. So the opioid crisis is real. And I believe that we need more funding for these programs. I can see exactly where this funding can go and what it could do to benefit our community. If we can get people into some good recovery programs and some good transitional programs after these 28 or 3 to 6 week programs, we can make this world a better place. A lot of the policing and arrests are connected to drugs. And I believe that if we do a better job with helping people to get out drugs and lead a successful life, and to eliminate the stigma around drug and alcohol dependency, I believe this would improve the problem of policing that we have. And I agree with you, mental health is also a component of that. We have not done a good job with mental health services. If you saw the movie Just Mercy, you will see through Hollywood's eyes the electrocution of a man who struggled with mental health issues. There is no way this man should have been in an electric chair. And there are many men and women who are in prison because they have not been properly diagnosed and they have ignored the cries of mental health services for these people. And I am telling you that I will fight for this because I've seen this firsthand as a chaplain. I've seen firsthand how people are on drugs and alcohol because they've been traumatized. And a lot of them are victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, either direct victims or they've grown up in it. So I think we need more funding around domestic violence programs. I believe we need to fund nutrition programs for children. And I believe that we need to invest in moving forward on these opioid crises. That's what I would do with the money.
Thank you, Ms. Robin. Ms. Keita, you're up next. Where would you put this funding at?
Okay, sorry. My internet cut out and just totally kicked me out there for a minute. So technology, I tell you. So for me, one of the first things that I would put this money in is reentry. And I would put that in reentry because right now in Nashville and in this country, we are not a second chance city here in Nashville, nor are we a second chance country. And there are so many barriers to reentry for people that have been formerly incarcerated. And I would put money in that because, as I said earlier, we cannot talk about people making successful transitions back into the community until we can talk about that first, that they can be successful. And right now, with the numerous barriers to reentry, they cannot. Tennessee has the most collateral consequences for people that have been formerly incarcerated. And we need to look at that and we need to deal with that. And then another thing that I would do is that while the legislature, they've done things around criminal justice reform, with the First Step Act and various things like that. But what's missing from that legislation, and which is one of the reasons why I say that it's important that we have somebody that can view these laws, policies, procedures from the lens of someone who has been formerly incarcerated, because it's not retroactive. So we can talk about mass incarceration and we can, wave our hats and our hands and, throw the confetti and say, oh, well, we have reduced the disparities between crack cocaine and powder cocaine. But we still have people that are in prison who were not able to, be impacted by that. And we have people that have already served their 20, 30, 40-year sentence because of this fictitious war on drugs. And so what are we doing for those people? How do we make them whole? Right now in our country, we have so many states that have legalized marijuana, but yet we still have people in federal prison with life sentences for marijuana. So, for me, again, I would, focus on reentry, and I would really focus on real criminal justice reform. And we need to talk about how we make people whole. And then I don't think that we can have this conversation about where we are in this country and what is going on right now without talking about how we are going to do reparations. We're not going to study it anymore. What is that a study? We know slavery happened, and we know that it was the worst sin in this country that was committed upon Black people. And we know that Black people need to be made whole. We know that a lot of things that we are talking about now, when we are talking about the disparities between, Black and brown people in low income communities, it all stems from slavery. When we look at the number of Black people that are homeowners, it all stems from redlining and all of those racist policies and procedures that forbid Black people from owning homes in certain areas and from getting, loans from banks. We can go even further and talk about how that impacted Black people being able to get businesses because banks were not giving them loans. We can talk about education. We had to create HBCUs because Black people couldn't go to school anywhere else. But now we're underfunding HBCUs and we're giving all of our money to all of these other institutions here. So again, we can't even be talking about where we are right now without talking about reparations. We don't need to be creating any type of any type of studies to study anything else. What we need to be doing is that we need to say, we need to make Black people whole. If we did it for the Japanese, then we can do it for Black people. And so we need to be having those conversations about what is reparations and what does it look like and how do we make Black people whole. It is time out for us to be talking about studying. It is time out for us to be having all these conversations about where we are, because again, where we are, every single system that is in place right now, there is systemic racism that was put in place, and these systems were designed to keep Black and brown people exactly where a lot of us still are today. And so we need to be having those conversations and we need to do something about it. And so those would be some of the ways that I would reallocate the funding. And I would also reallocate the funding when it comes to education. As I mentioned earlier, we cannot talk about dismantling the school to prison pipeline if we are not investing in our kids. And we have got to start investing in our kids, and we've got to start figuring out what that looks like. We've got to make sure that the education system all across this country is funded and that kids have what they need in order to be successful and in order to prosper. We don't need to have police in schools. What we can do is that we have organizations and communities that we can have in schools. And they are better equipped to deal with kids that look like them than police officers. And we need to provide programs and services for kids as well too, because again, this is all systemic. And one of the things that I am going to do once I win on August 6th is that I am going to personally create a program that takes kids in the inner city school every single year. They're going to come to Congress and they're going to visit me. And we are going to talk about what this is. And we are going to get them involved in this process at an early age. We're going to take them all around to see all of the monuments. We're going to do all of those very things that most of them will never even have an opportunity to do in their lifetime. I want kids to be able to see that there's something else outside of their zip codes. I didn't even get to Washington myself until I was an adult. And I don't want that for kids coming up behind me. I want kids to see that there are other ways and other things that they can do. And just to be able to inspire kids and to open their minds and to say that, hey, you know what? If she can do it, someone who came from a middle-class family, someone who has been to prison, come out, got a law degree, ran for Congress, and is in Congress, if she can do it, so can I. And so I want to be able to instill that type of inspiration into students in programs that I will create that will be beneficial to them, that will also assist in dismantling the school to prison pipeline.
Yo, excellent answer. We're still waiting on that 40 acres in Mune, boy. You're right. We are still waiting on 40 acres in Mune. And shout out to Spike Lee, who has never allowed us to forget it because he named it after his own production company. So I'm going to hop into some of the questions. Matt, try to check on your page. We're streaming like on 5 or 6 pages by myself. And I know Matt got some pages. So, you know, that goes like all over the place. So I apologize to some of our followers, but please try to filter your questions to Matthew Park, running for House District 15, or to Black Coffee. That's where we're going to start filtering from these calls in, some of these questions in. So one of the questions we have was asked by a young lady, which is, what is the definition of where we talked about the definition of I fear for my life? What is really following that clause? You know, y'all talked about how like in the moment he can justify himself because in that moment this is what was right for me to do. So what is really that definition, or what do we really allow officers to really be allowed to do? I mean, it's obvious they are definitely allowed to get away with brutality and run with that. But when we have a cop say, I fear for my life, you know, it's a terrible storyline to use, but they use it all the time. And so the reality is that when we're allowing officers to do that, what are we really saying as legislators and state representatives and even our local officials when we're allowing officers to use this as their pass of why they were over aggressive in a particular response? And we'll start with Ms. Keita Hayes. I'm sorry, I know you just went, but we'll just run right around you. And this round is 2 minutes. Everybody gets 2 minutes to go through this. So it's 2 minutes to the point. What does that mean when we start taking questions from the public? Because we try to get everybody in. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, so from a legal standpoint, it would probably be based upon what a reasonable officer would fear. That's going to be the legal standpoint, but from the standpoint that we all know it is just another way for them to justify what they have done to Black and brown people. That's just what it is. I mean, there's really no other way around it. When an officer says that they were in fear of their lives, it is just a justification for what they are choosing to do and how they are choosing to treat Black and brown and low income communities. It is just another way for them to continue to disrespect and dehumanize us. That's literally what it is. But I think it's going to come down to in the court of law, I think it's really going to come to somebody is going to have to challenge it and really ask, like, what does this mean? And then court systems are going to have to say that. And then, you know, we in the legislature are, you know, then going to be like, oh, this shouldn't have never been in there to begin with. You know, that's generally, you know, how it works. But it's unfortunate that that is something that is in there. And this is the reason why we need people that are looking at legislation from, you know, these lenses that is missing there in Congress right now. And maybe one of the three of us here on this call would have caught that and could have advocated against having that language included in there, or at least let our constituents know, hey, this is in here and this is why, and this is what it could lead to, so that people know what is going on and what is going to be coming.
Thank you, Ms. Keita Hayes. So we're going to do it a little different. Matthew said he's loaded with questions too. So we're going to try to kick it back and forth. So he's going to ask a question and pick a candidate to answer. And I'm going to kick a question and ask y'all to answer. We got about 20 minutes left. So let's use every valuable second that we got, because we want people to know what y'all stand for. All right, Matthew, let me shut up.
I'm actually going to answer this question myself. So the question is, there's so much talk about budgets. And so we had a person on Facebook ask, how can I find out about what's going on in the budget process? And unfortunately, I have no really good answer for that because local budgeting and county budgeting and state budgeting and federal budgeting are all separate processes. So on the state side, we really lean into some nonprofit groups like the Sycamore Institute to take that stuff in and analyze it. You can always look at the actual bills, but they're huge and they're written in terms meant to deceive a lot of times. So the best way to do that is to look out for your representatives and people running for office. Look out, they're going to be talking about the budget. They're going to be holding hearings on the budget. they're going to be holding town halls on the budget. And if they're not, and if you have a question, look for somebody that's in office, ask them, and probably you're more apt to get a good response if you look for somebody that's running for office. So talk to candidates. Candidates are watching these things like a hawk. They're looking at what their current representatives are doing. They're looking at what other people are doing. So definitely reach out to people that are in office or running for office, attend their town halls, read about these nonpartisan groups that are analyzing the budgets for you, and then go out and advocate and leave comments and call people. People really do listen to things, right? You're still muted, Constance.
Okay. I said next time, Matthew, you better come back with a question for somebody else next round. All right. So next question, Ms. Robin Hayes, I'm going to give you this one. Are we open to police advisory councils across the country? Community-based police advisory councils?
Absolutely. We have a community oversight board here in Nashville, and I'm just going to give a shout out to my husband, Arnold Hayes. He worked very hard to make sure we had a community oversight board here. And I think Keto was a part of that work as well. So I really believe in that. And the Justice for Policing Act, which is before Congress now, which has a fiscal note of 10 million, I think $100 million actually. You can fact check me on that, but it does have a huge fiscal note to provide funding for the use of independent investigations. So you can utilize your community oversight board in this way. If you have a good mayor and a cooperative city council, and of course a cooperative police chief. Now, I do know that Knoxville has a version of the community oversight board, but it's weakened because it doesn't have strong subpoena power. So it's important that we have communities oversight boards that are not just there for show, that are not just there to say we have one. We need to make sure community oversight boards are empowered with subpoena power and that they can do independent investigations and make findings and issue down disciplinary action. So the Justice and Policing Act has some good parts in it, and this is one of them. It allows for people to use the Community Oversight Board as an independent investigative body on police misconduct issues. So I really believe and support community oversight because we need accountability. One thing that I really like about the Community Oversight Board is that it's community inclusive. We have people from all over the segments of the community, but we got to make sure, Nashville, that we are not too political with it, that we don't keep off people who will make meaningful change, and that we don't give people a hard time who can really make progressive change on the board. We need people on these boards who are not afraid to speak truth to power, because that's exactly what you're going to have to do in this role. We've had some challenges with the Community Oversight Board because of conflicts between the board and the chief. So it is important that boards are willing to stand up and to fight. And also for those running for the state legislative seats, you need to be made aware that there were some there were some bills that went up that tried to take away power from the community oversight boards. And Knoxville went up there to support Nashville on this issue. Because one thing that Knoxville did say is that the Community Oversight Board has helped build a relationship between the police department. So we need community oversight. We need to build trust with the police department. Why would I call the police when I don't trust you? Why would I cooperate in a murder investigation when I don't trust you? There are statistics that show that murders go unresolved in Black communities, not because they don't have enough evidence, it's because the people in those communities don't trust to cooperate with the police. There is data that backs this up. So what can we do to outreach? That means share your power with the community. And if you don't want to share it on your own, I will make sure it happens as your United States Senator. I will pass legislation like the Justice in Policing to make sure that you comply with community oversight boards, or I'm going to take away your burn money and I'm going to take away your cops money. So when you talk about redistribution of funding for the police department, say, don't worry about it, federal government. We've got money over here that we're going to fund at least lunch and some other resources to make sure you all function, to show you that we support you and we want to partner with you. So the answer to that is yes.
Excellent,
Okay.
excellent. Yes, you hit so many things on the head. I ain't gonna have no follow-up. All right, Matthew, go ahead.
So Renee, this one's for you. So someone said that they are tired of going to the ballot box and having so many offices with no choices. So the big question is, and I'm going to tack something on to the end of this. The big question is, how do we get more people to run for office? And I'm tacking this on, what would you do as our Congresswoman to help get more people up and down the ballot to run for office?
Thank you, Matthew. That's a good question, because I do hear it a lot when I'm calling people and talking to them, that they're like, you know, I went to the polls and I just pulled the lever for a presidential candidate, and that's all I got to do. And as long as we keep doing that, you know, people aren't going to come out and vote for us, but we also have to have candidates that people are excited about. And, you know, I think it's hard to recruit candidates in these really red districts, because, you know, these districts are hard and it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time from your family. And, you know, I don't think we value people's efforts in those districts. And then when they lose, we just forget them. So I think it's important as a member of the Democratic Party that Democrats really work hard to encourage new people to run, that they help them with resources. My campaign is helping down ballot candidates, you know, with resources if they need it. You know, they can sit with me while I do call time. Nobody teaches you how to raise money. You have to learn it on your own. But if someone shows you how to do it, it's a little easier. So, you know, just really working hard to have down ballot candidates. And, you know, it'd be really nice if we had a big chunk of change in our district, because I think the second district really is on the move. The second district has been shifting towards Democrats since it was redistricted in 2012. So in my opinion, all those seats are up for grabs now. And we just have to have good candidates, because if we don't run good candidates, these districts don't flip by themselves. But we also have to understand that it is a multi-year commitment on behalf of the people that are working in the party, on behalf of candidates, on behalf of county and state parties, that we make sure that folks are being recruited, are being trained, and being supportive, because you just can't drop somebody out there, you know, in a campaign to figure it out by themselves. And I think we do that too many times, and everybody involved has a bad experience. So yeah, I think as sort of the top of the ticket, at least in the second district, I really try to encourage folks to run for office, and, you know, what I can do to help them.
Yeah, and I'll follow that up with Trump is president. So to anyone out there watching, you are qualified to run.
Oh, you're qualified. Yeah. Don't even think about it.
Yeah, and I know that you can reach out to anyone on this call and say, how do I run for office? Who do I need to talk to? Where do I go for resources? Every single person on this call I'm volunteering all of you, is more than happy to help you get ready, get plugged in and everything. We need good people.
And women of color, do not think that you are not qualified to do this, because it's a lot of work, but it's not hard. It's not complicated. You know, you're a candidate, you know, you're asking for votes and money, and hope, you know, but we need to have those support systems for candidates so that they can accomplish those things.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is a wrap for us today. My only question or concern or my outreach is that, here in Knoxville, we are celebrating Juneteenth in royal fashion this year. We're going to go all out, hard in the paint. Matthew is assigned with the task of sending you all an invitation to come out and endorse and stand in support of the Black agenda. As you know, Matthew has done something very bold as a candidate, something I've never seen Black candidates even do. He has flat out said, dear Black people, this is what I'm going to do for you. And I'm going to hold myself accountable to that, because he already put it in black and white writing and it's listed on his page. I'm on his website as part of his legislation for the African-American community. One of the things, and some of the very things that we have talked about today, he's our endorsing. He wants to see Black banks arise in Tennessee. He wants to see what we talked about, de-scoping of the police and putting those resources into social service and social needs. He is definitely in support of complete rewriting legislation on policies of not just of what our police can capabilities to do, but even our prison complex system, of course, civic, and how they've been able to infiltrate into our political arena and use that grass hoe of some of the things that we're talking about when you just said weed is legal, but people are sitting in jail for that right now. Well, that's part of core civics capability, being able to buy politicians at the same time. And so, he is part of all these different pieces of what he's going to do in his space on the state legislator with the Black agenda, but his Black agenda can go to the federal and local capacities as well, because again, Black lives do matter. But like many have already said with Ms. Keita, Ms. Robin, and Matthew and Renee, yourself, have all said this in your own direct way and indirect ways, that we're done with words. Action must start taking place now. Like you said, what do we need to study and research for? We're in the 500-year mark of having slavery been on our backs. And yet every single day I walk at this door, this country finds a way to remind me that I'm this close going back to the plantation. So the reality is that we have to start realizing we have to look at the way we're doing things. Change has to come one way or another. And like Ms. Robin said, normally when you're pushing change, you're going to be the unpopular person in the crowd. You're probably going to be one of the most hated people in the crowd. And that comes from both Black and white people. You got to keep in mind, Django showed us what? Stevens. Remember Samuel Jackson character? Stephen is a real thing in our community. It really exists. And that's the reality, though. We as Black people got to stop getting caught up on crumbs and understand we got to cash in crumbs for coins and dollars. And that's another problem that we have to face in battle. And so the truth be told, it's going to take all capacities in the village, as I've always talked all you about. We have to do this in a village forefront. It's going to take community leaders, activists, and organizations, nonprofit, churches, school educators, and etc. on one side of the fence. On the other side of the fence, we got to have our political offices from our state, local, and federal level understanding and connecting to that community. See, the problem, what we've been dealing with is we got people that get in office and they don't remember us no more. Oh, you remember me when it was time to get that vote, though. You was all at every community meeting. You was at my kids' basketball game, and you know what I'm saying? You was everywhere to be seen. But as soon as you got that vote and you got that seat, you vanished. We never saw you again. And that's a problem. See, that's an old way of doing things. See, we got to get to the new way. The new way is just like you was campaigning politically for your office. When you win, I expect to still see you at my kids' basketball game. I expect to still see you at every community meeting. I still expect to get an email, call from you saying, hey, Ms. Constance, are you good? I'm just checking in to make sure you're all right. I am still expecting that same treatment. And so many times the Black vote has found the way to be bought. We always seem to get bought out. I think Diddy and David Banner have made a good platform on this, have made a good platform on this. Excuse me. Excuse me. But I think Diddy and David Banner made a platform to this, which is that the Black vote is not for sale anymore. You can't just keep giving us fried chicken and great Kool-Aid and that's going to get it. You can't keep coming in here and putting beautiful football fields on our field that you're going to use to find a way to contract our kids to white schools later on and say that's good enough. You can't keep just giving us the bare minimum and say we did our job. That is unacceptable on so many platforms. And that's what we're here doing right now. We are showing people the different face. Yeah, you got your Tim Burketts and your Becky Macy's and your Lamar Alexanders and so many others. But the reality is that they stand in that party for a platform. They believe whatever the Republican Party say, that's what we're going to do. And like you said, we're watching that happen in Tennessee. Governor Lee has been so disrespectful to the essential frontline workers. Words cannot express how poor that is. But again, he is a Republican. And who's his president? Trump. And guess what he is? A Republican. And what is his mind state and behavior been? That we don't give a damn. Excuse my language for those out there, but that's the truth. That's what we've been getting. And so it is time for progressive state. It's not so much about a Republican or a Democrat. Like I tell you all the time, as an activist, I have no such friends. I'm looking for people-driven, people-serving candidates, period. And you can be in either party for me in that space. The matter is that when we come in one-on-ones or on these front views and showing the world what we're talking about, you got to say the right thing. And if you ain't saying the right thing, don't worry about me, because I ain't going to check your name at any ballot in any booth, no matter what you say, because I already know what you stand for. I'm sick of having the option of what somebody said. I'm sick of having to choose between Marshall Blackburn and Tim Burkett. As a Black person, neither one served my needs. So why am I choosing for either one of these candidates? I'm sick of having the choice between Joe Biden and Trump. Again, both of these people, when it comes to the Black people, really don't mean anything to me. I'm sick of being forced to vote for one ugly over the other, when in reality, for me as a Black person, neither one of them have done anything for me. And so we have to find ways to start breaking those barriers. And it's going to take people boldly out loud, Black, white, Latino, Hispanic, Puerto Rican, etc., to say, you know what? Y'all ain't been fair to the people of color. And I don't care what you're talking about. Until you do that, we ain't got nothing to talk about in here. It is a Knoxville for all. It is a Tennessee for all. It is the United States of America for all. It is a global for all, period. We have more poor people in the globe than we have anything else. I don't care how many rich people you find, there's not more poor people than there are rich people. It's just, you're not gonna find that scale. It's no such thing. We are the majority, and they are actually the minority. Unfortunately, we allowed them to use economics and other places of control like employment to use that as another form of, as Matt expressed, another form of oppression to instill upon us their imposed and unwilling selfishness and basically profitable acts. Profiting from poverty is a real thing. Profiting from homelessness is a real thing. Profiting from jail is a real thing. And we have to break these structures down, because they can't continue to profit, because when they profit, we just all suffer flat out. And so with that being said, I thank you all for coming out tonight. I hope y'all do able to lock yourselves in for Juneteenth. It's going to be a dope event around here. So much has been poured into this, the community, businesses, just regular people out in the streets walking up just saying, yo, I want to donate water. I cannot name the amount of water sent to my boy Matt front porch and in his house right now for this event. But it's critical. People are really seeing the change that's necessary to take. I think it's funny watching social media and seeing my white friends be like, I just dead 5 friends today, because they just didn't get with it. You know what I mean? Like, people have really been unacceptable of any form of racism, and even not even allowing the naive racism. They're not even letting that pass right now. Because like you just said, this is old. This is too old. We ain't got time to be explaining something that y'all already all know. And if you don't know, Google is too close by for you to be asking me questions about it. I'm done Black explaining. I'm done white explaining. I'm not gonna keep doing all that. Read a book is what I got for you. As Nikki Giovanni said in her most recent interview, you don't want to date nobody with no books on their shelf. And she's right. Because if you ain't got no books on your shelf, you ain't feeding that brain nothing but foolishness. If y'all want to take a 60-second round haul of each other, just giving y'all final sign off, that is it for Black Coffee and Matthew Park running for State District 15 show tonight. I appreciate everybody coming out. And like I said, real quick, we'll go around and give everybody 60 seconds of a closeout. Start with Ms. Robin Hayes. You're first.
Well, I want to thank you, Constance, for your support. And Matt, I thank you for the endorsement from Black Coffee Justice. And leadership should fight for democracy, liberty, and freedom. Our nation, the Republicans have chipped away at these foundations, the qualities of our nation. And I'm running because I'm going to take back the rule of law. I'm going to take back our democracy, and I'm going to make people believe in our government again. Because I do believe that we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Robin Hayes. Renee Hoyle, go.
First, I want to thank you for putting this on and taking all this effort to make sure that our voices are heard. I really appreciate that, and the endorsement from Black Coffee Justice. I'm Renee Lewis. I'm running for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. I think that we are standing at the very beginning of a new and exciting path for the United States if we can make it happen. And I think there are a lot of people out there trying to make it happen. The people on this show are working hard to make it happen. And I think we need to work every day for racial justice and equity. And I plan to do that in Congress. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Renee Hoyle. All right, Ms. Keita Hayes, bring us in.
So my name is Keita Haynes, and I am running for Congress in the 5th District here in Nashville. And right now, more than ever, everyone is calling for change. We are demanding change, and we are demanding that our voices be heard. Because for far too long, too many of us have felt locked out, left behind, and shut down by a government that was designed to govern in our interest. And right now, it is important that we have somebody in Washington that is going to restore the power back to the people. It is important that we have somebody in Washington who is going to stand beside people and to amplify their voices. Right now in Washington, it is time that we have somebody who is really going to fulfill the purpose of serving we the people. And so please visit my website at www.ketahaynes.com. Please click on the link to get involved. And there's always the link where you can donate, because I can't do this alone. I need your help in order for us to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Keita Hayes. All right, Matthew Park, close us out. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to pushing through 2020 campaign trail. Let's get y'all in office. As far as I'm concerned, everybody's going to office. We're going to claim that. Looking forward to 2020 and having several congressional friends on board. I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. This was an amazing discussion. Again, I'm Matthew Park. I'm running for the Tennessee State House here out of District 15 in Knoxville. I'm running because I'm tired of seeing Tennessee at the top of every bad list and the bottom of every good list. I'm tired of seeing our politicians be bought off by private prisons, by fossil fuel money. I'm tired of seeing our communities here in Knoxville and across the state breathing bad air, drinking bad water, being incarcerated on a massive scale, being oppressed. I am tired of watching that. I am tired of watching the prison industrial complex come into every aspect of our lives. And that is what I intend to go to Nashville and tear down in any way that I can. I intend to not only stop Tennessee from using private prisons, I intend to ban CoreCivic from the state. So their headquarters shouldn't be in Nashville anymore. We don't let people that profit off of suffering have anything to do with our state, because Tennessee has the opportunity to be an amazing place, to be the beacon of hope for the rest of the country. That's what we intend to build it up as, and tear down everything else.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes tonight's show. Thank you all for coming out. And like I said, everybody have a wonderful evening, a good weekend. I hope to see a lot of you all at Juneteenth. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good